Good morning, 4th grade. Today's lesson is lesson 29. The objective for lesson 29 is you'll be able to use the multiplication facts of 0, 1, 2, and 5. So let's go ahead and look at our first example for lesson 29. We're going to be looking at the number 0. So in example 1, we're looking at 0 times any number equals 0. So here I have on the left 0 times 5, 0 times 7, and 0 times 100. And I have the same numbers just flipped in a different order, which is 5 times 0, 7 times 0, and 100 times 0. So anytime we're looking at multiplying a number by 0, it's always going to equal 0. So 0 times 5 is 0. 0 times 7 equals 0. 0 times 100 equals 0. And the same thing over here. We're looking at 5 times 0 equals 0. 7 times 0 equals 0. And 100 times 0 equals 0. Let's look at another example now. We're going to be looking at the number 1. So 1 times any number equals the number. So if I have, for example, on my left side here, I have 1 times 5, 1 times 7, 1 times 100, 1 times 99, and again, flipped in the other order on the right side, 5 times 1, 7 times 1, 100 times 1, 99 times 1. Anytime we're multiplying by 1, we're going to get that same exact number we're multiplying by. So in case this one, 1 times 5 is just going to be 5. 1 times 7 is going to be 7. 1 times 100 equals 100. 1 times 99 equals 99. And the same thing flipped over here. 5 times 1 equals 5. 7 times 1 equals 7. 100 times 1 equals 100, and 99 times 1 equals 99. Let's look at example 3. Now we're going to be multiplying by 2's. So 2 times any number doubles the number. So I notice over here I have 2 times 5, 2 times 7, 2 times 100. Same thing on the right side, just flipped in different order. When we look at multiplying by 2's, it's basically just doubling the number. So for example, if I have 2 times 5, it's basically just saying 5 plus 5, which we know 5 plus 5 equals 10. Well, it's the same thing here. I'm taking 2 times 5, which equals 10. Same thing here. 2 times 7 is the same thing as writing 7 plus 7 equals 14. But over here we're saying 2 times 7 equals 14. Let's look at the next one. 2 times 100. It's the same thing as writing 100 plus 100, which we know equals 200. So the same thing, 2 times 100 equals 200. And it's the same thing over here, just flipped in different order. So now I have 5 times 2, which is still the same thing, 10. 7 times 2, which equals 14, and 100 times 2, which is still 200. Okay, let's look at example 4. We're going to be looking at the number 5. So we have 5 times any number equals a number that ends in a 0 or in 5. So let's look at this. I have, looking at our multiplication facts on this example, on the left side, I have 5 times 1, which equals 5. 5 times itself, we just talked about, is 5. I have the next example, 5 times 2, which equals 10, because we know that 5 plus 5 equals 10. So same thing, 5 times 2 equals 10. Next example, 5 times 3. Well, 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15. And the next one I have 5 times 4, which is 20. So 5 times 5 equals 25. 5 times 6 equals 30. And 5 times 7 equals 35. Now you notice a pattern here, fourth grade. I'm just adding 5 to each of my answers. So I'm counting kind of by 5s here. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. And you can probably follow the pattern without even doing multiplication, but we're going to do it anyway. So 5 times 8 equals 40. 9 times 5 is 45. 5 times 10 is 50. And 5 times 11 is 55. And 5 times 12 is 60. Now you'll notice the pattern here. Remember, it told us 5s and numbers, okay? So 5 times any number equals a number that ends in 0 or 5. So here, ends in 5, ends in 0, 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 ends in 5, ends in 0. So here we see that pattern when we're doing the multiples of 5. And again, I'm just pointing to the pattern. You know that 5 is the difference between each of these numbers. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. And over here I have some examples that are on the right side just to reiterate. It's the same thing, and whether I write 5 times 2 or 2 times 5 equals 10. 5 times 5 is 25. And 12 times 5 is 60. Here we wrote it as 5 times 12, but here it's flipped and has 12 times 5. Again, still going to get the same answer when I do that. Okay, so today we looked at our objective, which was that you would be able to use the multiplication facts of 0, 1, 2, and 5. So let's do a couple problems together just to close with our lesson for today. So we know that 0 times 5, anything multiplied by 0 is going to be 0. So 0 times 5 is 0. Let's do one with using our 1. So let's do 1 times 5, which will equal 5. Let's look at our 2's. So we did 2 times 5, which equals 10. Or we said 2 times 7, which equals 14. Or if I just want to reflip these around, which mean the same thing, is 5 times 2 equals 10. Or 7 times 2 equals 14. Then we looked at our 5's, which we counted by 5. So we had 5 times 1, which equals 5. 5 times 2, which equals 10. 5 times 3, which equals 15. 5 times 4, which equals 20. And we notice when we have our multiples of 5, we're counting by 5s. So we have here 5, 10, 15, 20, which we had for our answer. So that's that pattern of counting by 5s. And we know our multiples of 5 either end in a 5 or a 0. So today's lesson 29 was, again, being able to use your multiplication facts of 0, 1, 2, and 5.